Hi, I'm Sam from Syntaur, and today we're going to take a couple of minutes and talk about knobs and potentiometers in the situation where you might not have the knob you need to fit on the potentiometer, and so what do you do? Let's take, for instance, an old vintage synthesizer, and out of all the knobs, you probably have most of them, but maybe you're missing a couple. What do you do if those knobs aren't available anymore? Well, one thing we do on occasion is we'll just replace all of the knobs to a different one, give it a little customized look, but at least it's consistent. So there are several things to consider when you do that. First of all, there are three basic types of shafts on the potentiometers, and that's the first thing to consider. Here's a Jupiter 8 we're currently working on, and you can see this one has knurled shaft potentiometers. In other words, there are splines on there, and so the knob fits onto those splines and catches, and that's how it turns. Another potentiometer type is on this Roland Juno G. I'll pull the knob off here, and you can see that this knob has a flattened side on it. In other words, the cross section is kind of like a D-shaped, so that's called a D or a flat shaft knob. And then the third type is used on a lot more of the really old stuff like Mini Moog and such. This has just a round knob, and so the type of, or a round shaft, and the type of knob that goes on there has a set screw, and it just screws into that shaft a little bit, and that's how it keeps the knob tight. And so that's the first thing to consider if you want to replace the knobs on a piece of gear. Is it a round knob? Is it a flat or D shaft knob, or is it a knurled shaft knob? So you got to get the right type of knob. Let's take a look at this one close up. This is the D shaft knob that I pulled off of here. And so let's say I pick this D shaft knob to replace it, thinking this will work. Well, there's a couple of things to consider here. One is that this one has a shank that goes down, and so that's not going to work. But here's the other important thing that a lot of people don't realize as well. They get this D shaft knob and they put it on, and oh, okay, the minimum should be here, but the indicator is pointing up here, so it's 90 degrees off. So that's a thing you need to consider. The indicator on this knob is opposite the flat part, and so you need to make sure that whatever knob you're getting to replace that is of the same orientation. And then here's another little quirk that comes up sometimes on this Moog source. Let's pull this knob off. This is a D shaft knob too. And so let's take the D shaft knob from the Roland Juno G and see if this will work. Well, the problem is it doesn't even go on there, and that's because on some D shaft knobs, this flat part is actually deeper than the flat part on the Roland. So that's another crazy quirk that you got to deal with. And this is an older piece of gear, this Moog source, and that's where you'll find more of these D shafts that are cut in there more. Most of the modern potentiometers that are used on, Juno G and stuff of this more modern era, the shafts are pretty identical cut. So most of the D shaft knobs will translate, but you just got to be aware of that also. So you have to consider, first of all, the three types of shafts. Is it a round shaft, a knurled shaft, or a D shaft? And then if it is a D shaft, you have to get the orientation of the indicator correct, and then just make sure everything else is right, if it actually fits onto the shaft. So the D shaft stuff gets a little more complicated, but in general, most of them translate as long as you get the orientation of the indicator line correct. So that's it. It's a good way to end up fixing a synthesizer where you're actually missing a couple of knobs and just can't find them anywhere. Just replace all of the knobs and get your own customized look.